All right. Okay, well, we'll get started today. Thanks so much for that introduction, Liz. As mentioned, am Megan Buchheit. I've been with Lautman for about 6 years, working with nonprofits on building and growing their digital fundraising programs. And I've been working with nonprofits for just over 10 years now. I'll turn it over to Michelle.
And I am Michelle Lee. I'm an account director at Lautman. I have been with the agency. I was actually a Boomerang employee, started with the company, left for a little bit, and then came back. When I left, I went out into outside the fundraising world and into the employer branding world, if anyone is familiar with that. And I have been in the industry for about, oh my God, 15, 17, 18 years maybe. So excited to present to everyone. Part of this will be interactive, so we will ask you to raise your hands or put some answers in the chat. So just getting you all ready for that. So I will get this party started with testing in direct response. If you want to start the slide. So today's conversation, we will cover the ins and outs of testing in direct response. Megan will showcase some test ideas and results from a lot of different clients that we work with, while I will present a case study for one particular client that I work with in the nonprofit space. And you'll leave the session with a better understanding of testing, plus hopefully you'll take away some of these ideas and maybe use in your classroom or share them in your classroom. So the fundamentals of testing, we'll talk a little bit about that, just so we're all in alignment of what testing is in direct response, so that this will kind of make sense throughout the entire PowerPoint or presentation. So why do we test? Well, we test because we want to move the needle for our programs, and every organization has programmatic goals. And as much as we would love to think that just doing what we typically do day in, day out, the controls that we mail are working, and that we can just kind of ride it with that, we do need a test, because testing is what will help you move the needle and will help you with learnings. We also want to build on what's working to see, are your packages or emails or digital kind of campaigns, are they working? Or is it something that we need to change because the environment's changing, donor behavior is changing. So it's always good to test to see if what you're doing is working, or maybe you need to change it up a bit. And as always, you want to stay one step ahead of your competition. Your competition is always testing, and so should you. And we need to be, as kind of agencies and different organizations, you always need to test to stay innovative and to stay kind of really check the pulse of how donors or consumers are responding. So how do we do this? Well, before anyone ever gets started, you should define your goal before you test. You don't want to test to see results. If your organization is really about, we need to increase the number of donors, or we actually are good with the number of donors, we need to increase how much they're giving, you really need to decide what your goal is. And that way, everyone in the program is aligned on what the goals are for that particular program. I think many of us will know this from, testing in science classes in high school or grade school, but you really only want to test one thing at a time. You have your control, and you have the one variable that you're testing. And this is helps to keep in check, so you understand what is it that moved the needle. And you also want to ensure there's enough quantity to split the data so that we can get statistically significant results. If you kind of only have a quantity of 100 and you split it 50-50, and your kind of response is low and you don't have enough quantity, you're not really going to get that statistical significance to have a readable result. And also, as much as we would love to see decisions and conclusions very quickly, you do need to wait a bit, especially in the mail, to come up with a conclusion. What's nice about digital, and Megan can speak to this, is that digital, you can see results instantly. So that's great, and you can kind of use those learnings and move forward. With mail, you got a whole process of sending out the mail. The donor opens the package. The donor has to make a decision. They have to write a check or write down their credit card, submit it back, and mail it back in. And then it needs to be processed. And that takes a bit of time. So you want to wait, I would say about 8 weeks before you come up with a conclusion. And how often do you want to test? You want to test as often as you can. I mean, it's always good to learn. So I would say if you have the budget, if an organization has the budget for it and the time and resources, you should try and test as much as possible. So how do we evaluate tests? It's a little bit different for digital versus the mail. In digital fundraising, we usually focus on response conversion rates and page completion rates, and Megan will speak to that in a bit. And then for mail fundraising, we usually focus on response rate, so the number of gifts that come in, average gift, so that's the dollar amount the gifts come in. And then specifically for acquisition, which is prospecting and getting new donors, we really look at the cost to acquire, and that's what I'll focus on my part of the presentation. And with that, we'll turn it over to testing in digital marketing.
Yeah, so we're gonna, as Michelle said, we're gonna go over a test from a variety of different nonprofit organizations today. And we're also gonna talk about a few different types of tests. So the 3 types of tests, we're gonna focus on our first, email testing. Second is landing page testing. Now there are a variety of types of landing pages that we use in digital campaigns, but what we're going to focus on here today is really all donation forms. So since we're focused on fundraising, we're really looking at donation forms that are trying to get donors to make a gift rather than petitions or advocacy type forms. And then finally, our third type of test that we're going to talk about a little bit are mobile tests. So SMS texting, because that is a channel that is becoming increasingly important for digital fundraising. And I'm going to start off each of these sections with some kind of basic ideas for email tests that are really important ones that are pretty simple to implement and can make a big difference for an organization. So the first one is subject line, sender, and preview text tests. And these are really important because these really determine if a donor is going to actually open the email that you're sending. So we do a lot of experimenting with this, with trying different email senders, formatting maybe the name of the email sender, changing up our subject lines and trying to make them eye-catching, and also doing the same thing with our preview text, which is the first line of an email that you see before you even click on it in your inbox. So we do lots of experimentation with these 3 things. We also recommend experimenting with the send time for your emails. This is something that can vary dramatically based on if an organization is based in one particular region and most of their donors are also based in that region, or if they're perhaps a national or international organization. This is something we really recommend doing some experimenting with. And then the next few things that are useful to test all kind of have to do with copy and design, and those include things like testing the button color in your emails, testing the copy that's on those buttons. We use a lot of them because they're so eye-catching, and just making small tweaks to them can make a big impact. And we also recommend incorporating other sorts of messaging and simple copy tests. We'll talk about a few examples of those today, so that you can see how just, once again, really small tweaks make a big difference. And then finally, email design. And this is kind of a place where the sky is kind of the limit. So we'll talk about how using different email formats can help switch things up. But we'll also talk about, you can do things like changing the type of art that you're using in an email, or changing all types of formatting. Using even a bigger font size can make a difference. All those types of tests are also good options. So now I'll go into some specific examples. And the first one is a sender test, like I mentioned. So this is for an animal group that we work with, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And we tested if using their acronym PCRM at the end of this sender name, how that would impact the email results. And we actually saw that leaving it off for this test was the winner. And it not only got a higher response rate from their donors, but there was also higher revenue. So we didn't just look, at things like an open or click-through rates for this. We really want to look at how it's impacting donors' giving behavior as well. So this is something, like Michelle was saying, this is a test we were able to implement the results from immediately. So the following emails in this series all did not include the organization's name, and that helped to boost the overall results. So our second test is a really simple button test, like I mentioned, where we just changed one thing. As you'll see in the control, we just used donate now on the button, but then on the test, we changed it to say renew now. And we tried this test over a couple of emails, and it made a huge difference. It increased the page completion rate, and it raised over 2 times the revenue by switching that button to say renew. And this is something I see throughout all types of fundraising, that the word renew is really powerful. So I'm not surprised that it made a difference here, but we're really pleased to see how much it increased the revenue, and also the page completion rate. When we talk about page completion rate, we're really talking about the number of donors that clicked on the donation form that actually followed through to making their gift. So there's always going to be some drop off with people that click on a donation form and then don't end up going through the entire process, but we want to keep that number as high as possible. So it's something we place large importance on. Another test that we did was just a small copy test, is we changed the ask amount inside the email. So the email on the left used a $20 ask amount, asking donors to make a $20 gift. And the email on the right asked donors to make a $40 gift. And we saw, again, this was, sounds like something that people might just even gloss over, but it made a huge difference. And it increased our page completion rate once again, raised over 2 times the revenue using the $20 ask. So that lower ask, donors really responded really well to. And even though it was lower, it ended up raising more revenue. So our next test is about email send time, which I talked a little bit about earlier. So we did this for the human services group that we work with, that has a presence nationally in the US, but a lot of their donors are based either in the East Coast or on the West Coast. But we kind of gotten into a habit of sending a lot of their emails early in the morning, and we realized, oh, that might not be the best tactic. So we shifted some of them later in the day for this test, and started sending emails around 3 p.m. instead. And we saw that increased our page completion rate once again and increased our response rate. And this is the kind of test where those time zones are really important, and you definitely want to test it over multiple emails. And it's something that can change over time. So as you can see, this test was back in 2021. So this is something we'll probably be looking at to actually retest again very soon, just to make sure that a lot has changed since 2021 in the world. And so we just want to make sure that this is still the best time for us to be sending our emails. And then our final email test focuses on email formatting. So on the left, we have what we call an invoice style design. On the right, we have a very plain text email. So the one on the left, the invoice, this is a format we use a lot. We do kind of a lot of different plays on this invoice style, where it includes lots of personal information. This is a tactic that you're probably familiar with. We use it a lot in the mail as well for direct response. It works really well there. And it's also something that's very popular in the commercial world. If you've ever gotten like a renewal notice from a magazine or some sort of membership, it uses a lot of these similar techniques, and we find that they tend to work well. But using these very personal plain text emails can also work well, just because they do look so personal for the donor. So we tested these two things against each other to see what would work the best. And we saw that the invoice was once again the winner, increasing revenue and response rate. So this is something we use in a variety of campaigns, and kind of are always trying to find new formats to iterate on. Okay, so I'm going to go into our next section, which is on landing page tests. But do let me know if you have any questions at any point in time. For landing page tests, a few things that we always recommend testing include the ask string, which is the suggested donation amounts that are on the top of the donation form, or in the mail on the top of a reply form, that just kind of help shape donor giving behavior. So there are a lot of different things that you can test with an ask string. One of the first things are just doing a regular versus a reverse ask string. So changing the order from ascending to descending, or vice versa. Testing the number of ask amounts, doing 3 asks versus 4 or 5 asks, or changing an ask string to have higher or lower amounts. We frequently see that for people who are new to an organization online, that it works better to use a lower ask string for them when we're trying to get them to make their first gift. But people who are repeat donors, we can use a higher ask string for them, and that helps boost their giving. And then another thing we focus on with landing pages are usually removing. We try to avoid adding fields to donation forms. And that's just because of what I was talking about earlier with the page completion rate. As we add more things to forms, we usually see that page completion rate goes down because the more things that you add, the less people will stick with them and fill them out to the very end, especially as so many of us are now opening emails on our phone and trying to navigate donation forms on our phone. We really also want to make sure that those donation forms are mobile friendly and that they're as short as possible, just so people will follow through with making their gift. Throughout all of this, we're really trying to keep a close eye on what the donor experience is to make it as easy as possible for them. We never want them to have to struggle to make a gift or get hung up in the technology of a donation form. And then the last thing for a donation page that we think about is frequently adding an image or not having an image. And if having an image turns out to be a good thing for that organization, what that image is, because that can make a big difference. Having a really impactful emotional image frequently works well, but that can vary for an organization. So like I said, it's always a good thing to test. Okay, so the first test for donation forms revolves around mobile payment options. And this one features PayPal, but this similar tests also apply for Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, any of those options. Do any of you all use mobile payment options? Okay, I'm seeing some hands. And so I'm sure you're familiar then with how easy they make it to quickly do a transaction on your phone. Well, the same is true we see for donation forms in most cases. And for this test, when we added PayPal, we saw that not only did it increase that page completion rate, which is what we were hoping to see, it also increased the average gift that people were willing to make. So we usually see really strong results from adding those sort of things to donation forms, just because they do make it so easy. So another test that we have done for a lot of different groups is covering the transaction fee. So when you use a credit card, there's always a transaction fee that that institution usually pays on your behalf, usually 3%. And for retail or something like that, they absorb the cost. But for nonprofits, we have added this option to most of our forms so that the donor can add a little bit of an increase to their gift and help cover that fee, which really does help organizations. So pretty consistently across the board, we see that when we add the transaction fee option to donation forms, there's actually no difference between the control and the test, which this is a case where that's very much the result we want to see, because as long as it doesn't hurt giving or the page completion rate, we are comfortable adding it to those forms because it's helpful for the nonprofits. And then the next test is about annual giving options. So are any of you monthly donors to nonprofits? See another hand? Okay. So see a couple more. So monthly and annual giving are a really big focus for nonprofits, just all sorts of recurring giving, especially online, because that's where they tend to be the easiest to implement. So you'll see here, the donation form on the left already had an option for donors to make a monthly gift, but we added an option on the right for the test for them to also make a yearly gift. So this is a gift that will renew annually each year. And this sort of tactic is really helpful because for nonprofits, because it helps increase retention. It helps kind of boost this like steady stream of reliable revenue for them. And it's also it's easier for donors. If it's a group that they consistently support, they don't even have to think about doing it anymore. So we added it to this donation form. And as you'll see here, once again, this is a test. We didn't see any difference between the control or the test. And that's exactly what we wanted to see. As long as it didn't hurt our results, we felt confident with rolling out with it in the future. So this is now something we have on a lot of our donation forms for this group.
And Megan, can I add? So for those of you who are donors, whether you're a one-time donor or a monthly donor, I think you will start to notice, because this is a huge push in the nonprofit world, you will start to notice now that we've had this conversation that a lot of folks are pushing for that annual gift, whether it's online. It works better online than through the mail. But I think it'll be interesting a year from now if you come back and say, oh, actually, I did notice that, because it is a big push in the industry.
Definitely. Okay, well, we'll go on to our final section for digital testing, and that is to talk about mobile. So, like I said, this is a growing channel for a lot of groups, and it's important for a lot of reasons, but one of the primary reasons is just that as email inboxes get more and more crowded, this is just another touch point that we can have with donors. And, you know, I know, speaking for myself, sometimes I ignore my emails, but I almost never ignore my text messages. I open all of them all the time. So it's, you know, a good way to connect with donors, especially during busy times. And there are a lot of things you can also test for mobile. One of the big things that we recommend that I'll talk about a little bit more is text testing, SMS versus MMS. And that is text testing a plain, just like text email message versus a message that also includes an image of some type. This is also a place where we like to test send time, just because the time that people may answer their emails is very different than when they look at their text on their phone. So you always want to be aware of that and perhaps adapt accordingly. But really, a lot of the tests that we've already talked about so far today for email and landing pages also apply for mobile. And we really recommend with mobile, this is just a great time to make our testing multi-channel and to see if the results we have in email are holding up via mobile and vice versa. So actually both, all the mobile examples you're going to see today are part of a larger campaign that we also did via email. And this first example focuses on a premium, which is just a gift that a donor gets in exchange for making a gift. A lot of times they are things like tote bags. I'm sure you've all seen many of those floating around, or things like water bottles or clothing items. And this one is about a beanie. So we tested the art design for this premium, and this was done across email and mobile to see if just showing the beanie on its own was better than showing the beanie on a person, to see which design works the best. And we saw in both mobile and email that the beanie on its own was the winner for the response rate. So just focusing on that by itself was the winner here. And then our second mobile test that also included a premium was a little bit different. So this campaign, we wanted to see here if using the premium was necessary, or if we could just send donors a renewal message and see if they would respond. And we saw here that in this case, the premium really did help the results. So it more than doubled the donations and nearly doubled the response rate. So this is also an example of, we did this test at the beginning of the campaign. So then we were able to roll out and implement these results really quickly. So the subsequent emails and messages in this campaign all included the premium offer. So that's one of the good things about digital, like Michelle said, just that we were able to adapt so quickly when we see results that are this strong. So this is our last digital test. Do you all have any questions before we move on to the mail section?
Hold on, I see something. Oh, NPR. Somebody was saying yes, they
That's me. I give to monthly. I give my monthly gifts.
That's you.
Yeah. Thought everyone should know.
I have a quick question. If that's okay.
Yeah.
Quick question. So the tests that you showed, like for example, adding yearly, donations. What exactly you guys use to measure? Is it number, the dollars? What kind of metrics do you usually use?
Using to evaluate that test.
Yeah, like any test, right? For the donations, I would say the number of people who donated versus the number of money, like the amount of money that you get, there might be slightly interesting, insights.
Yeah, so for that test, we really focused on a few key things. The page completion rate, like I talked about, just to make sure that having that option didn't throw people off. And then looking at the response rate, so the number of people that donated, and then also we will keep an eye for something like that on the average gift, just to make sure that if people are choosing that option, that's not making them give much smaller gifts than we usually see for regular donations.
And just to chime in, because I work on a couple of these clients,
Yeah.
and I think this goes for mail too, but it's funny, sometimes when we add things like that yearly option, the goal may not be to get yearly donors. Like I know, for instance, when we tested the QR code on the envelope, we really just wanted to make sure it wasn't hurting performance. So in this case, as Megan said, it's great to get annual donors, but really, maybe we just want to make sure that providing the option doesn't hinder someone from completing the page. Same thing in the mail, by adding that QR code, we want to make sure that someone's not totally freaked out by that and they're just throwing the mail away and not responding. Like, yes, getting the additional gifts through the QR code is a great perk and really training our donors to maybe give in a different way. But I think what Megan talked about and what I know Michelle will talk about too is just going back to goals. And, it's always great when we add something or do something and we see a positive return. But I think sometimes too, what's equally as important is that it's not hindering performance in other ways.
Definitely.
And I'll add one of the clients I work with who's trying to do this annual giving sign up through the mail, they're okay with one-time response being lower, as long as the number of people who sign up for annual giving kind of makes up for that decrease in the initial one-time gift. So they're okay with sacrificing that. Some organizations aren't. So again, like Jordana said, it's about kind of figuring out what your goals and what your threshold for pain is in the upfront.
Megan, I want to know more about the implementation phase after your testing. So, for example, if you are having the list of the 10,000 possible approaches, how did you split it for the testing and the actual implementation? And what is the time period? What is the process you decide the time period of the testing for the further implementation?
So just to clarify, make sure I understand your question. Like, are you curious, like how long it takes us to evaluate a test, or how long we give ourselves to implement a test like this?
So when you are designing the campaign, let's say that you have the testing phase to figure out which works better, and then you have the campaign phase to implement what you got successfully from the testing phase. And I want to know, how did you split the size for the test? And also want to know the period of time that given for the test period before the implementation.
Okay, so for splitting the segments, for a lot of these tests, it really just depends on the type of test. But a good amount of these, we are just splitting our email file 50-50% to see what the results are. Some of them will do smaller tests, but a good amount of them will do just a 50-50 split. And the great thing about email is, I mean, a lot of times you can see really strong results one way or another after even just less than a day. So, but really after a solid 24 hours, you usually have a pretty strong sense of what your final test result is going to be. And that's just because people online either generally respond or they don't pretty quickly. So the bulk of gifts do tend to come in within 24 hours.
All right, thank you.
All right, I think we can turn it to mail.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask everyone to get your keyboards ready, because this is going to be a bit interactive, not too complicated, either win, lose. I'll get into that. So testing the mail, we're going to focus on one client, and that client is Doctors Without Borders. I guess in the chat or raise of hands, do any of you know who Doctors Without Borders is, or do you support Doctors Without Borders? I'm interested to know, just to get some context. All right, Betsy, it looks like you know. Do you donate to Doctors Without Borders? Well, maybe you will afterwards.
No, I don't donate, but I am very aware of them.
Okay, great. All right, so just to give everyone some context, Médecins Sans Frontières, I'm sorry, my French is terrible. They are also known as Doctors Without Borders in the US. I'll call them MSF throughout the remainder of the presentation because that's how they're known. They work in 70 countries around the world, providing life-saving medical care to victims of conflict, natural disasters, epidemics, and healthcare exclusion. So during COVID, like at the peak and throughout, they've been on the ground working in the US and also countries around the world to responding to the virus, among other things. They actually have a donor file size of 800,000 donors. That is a lot of donors. That is not a lot of organizations have that. It is a massive file. And acquisition efforts to recruit donors are necessary to stem attrition and raise critical funds to help save lives around the world. So while they have 800,000 names of active donors, so those are people who've given in the past 2 years, there are people who fall off, people who lapse out, people who don't give for some reason. So we always have to replenish the file through massive acquisition efforts. Go to the next slide. A little bit about their program. Over the past 3 years, the Neill volume has ranged from 23 to 36 million pieces, which is a lot. Some of you have maybe received some of their acquisition pieces. There's a tote bag that you might recognize that I'll show you. In 2021, MSF acquired 193,000 new donors to support its life-saving work. Their acquisitions mail monthly. For a lot of organizations, you don't mail monthly, but because of the quantity, MSF is able to do that. In 2019, Doctors Without Borders mailed 3 control packages. So control packages are your long-standing packages that you mail for them monthly. You don't make a lot of changes to it. You know it works, so you mail that, and that's what you use the control packages to test against the new packages. A lot of organizations don't have multiple control packages, but with MSF, we have been able to test into multiple packages. So now in 2023, we have 6 co-controls, and we'll go over 2 of them today. So any questions about acquisition control, kind of any of the words I've used, language? All right. If you have any questions, put it in the chat, and then Liz or Amy can kind of flag me for that. So before we start to do any type of testing organizationally at Lautman, we do a SWOT analysis. As we mentioned before, we need to be in alignment with the agency, our internal teams, but also the client on what the goals are for the program, specifically for the acquisition program. So we always like to do an annual SWOT analysis to really understand what are the strengths of the program, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. And for the past couple of years, the threats have been everything we've kind of experienced in life generally: inflation, supply chain issue, the economy. These things are also affecting direct mail and nonprofit organizations. And what's great about a SWOT analysis is that anytime you're thinking of a test idea, you can map it back to your SWOT and say, is this hitting one of the kind of pieces we've talked about, one of the weaknesses? If we're doing a test about cost, like, is this hitting one of the things that we've discussed in the analysis? That's always important to do. We like to do that annually with Doctors Without Borders. Go to the next slide. So this is kind of where we began when we first started working with MSF. They had this tote control package. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it's been a long-standing control. The mailing mailed in a box, which can't see. I'm not sure if you can see it right now, but it is a box package, which is interesting. You have an upfront premium, so that means it's a premium that you get whether you give a gift or not. You get it when you open your package. There's a letter. There's a reply form where you can say, this is how much I want to give. That's where you put your check or your credit card information, and a little brochure that talks a little bit about the organization. So for this package, it was very strong for many years. It had a 1% response rate, which if you can have over a 1% response rate in acquisition, that is kind of a unicorn. That's great. Many organizations don't get that type of response. And then the average gift was $40 to $50. And just for context, when you get a front end premium, a lot of donors will just kind of give a gift because they feel bad that you got this premium. And so they just give a gift, and it tends to be a lower dollar gift. But the fact that MSF sends out a tote in the front end and they have a $40 to $50 means it's a really strong average gift. So we have this tote. But we did a SWOT analysis and we were saying, oh my gosh, this is costing a lot of money, this box package. We have all these supply chain issues, but also response rates going down. There's a whole host of things that were happening as we were thinking, of new test ideas from 2019 to now. So we started to test, and this is where I'm going to ask you to kind of guess. I'm going to show a test, and you're going to say in the chat whether you think it won or lost. So we'll start with the first test. The first thing we wanted to do was to help reduce costs and also improve the environmental impact of this package. The box package that was originally mailed in had styrofoam. It was really expensive to mail. So we wanted to test a FedEx style zip package where you open it through the zip, the zip style. And we really wanted to see how that would impact results. So in the chat, let me know, do you think this FedEx style package won or lost to the box? All right, well, it's kind of 50-50. All right, well, I think people are thinking it won. So survey says, actually, there was no impact on results. So response and average gifts stayed the same. That was great for us because sometimes no impact can still be a big win, because at the end of the day, we were just trying to reduce costs and improve and make sure that we weren't hurting the environment with the styrofoam. So this didn't have an impact, so we rolled out with this as quickly as we could. All right, then the next test is we wanted to improve the average gift without hurting response. So for a lot of organizations, including $1,000 ask is normal. And we saw that the average gift was already high. It was $40-50. Why don't we just put that $1,000 ask in there? Beforehand, it stopped at 500. We're going to add 1,000. So by adding the $1,000 ask, do you think it hurt response, kept it the same, or lifted it, or improved average gift? So basically, do you think it was okay? All right, this one's a little bit more 50-50. All right, and the answer is response rate dropped significantly, and we tested this twice because we were in disbelief. We could not believe that it actually hurt response rate as much as it did. And the kind of key takeaway here is sometimes you just need to accept defeat. We tested this twice. We used up a test slot. We used up time and resources to test this twice. And sometimes you just need to go with the results and say, okay, unfortunately, we lost. And this is, while results from other organizations show that this wouldn't happen, this is what the prospective donors of Doctors Without Borders in their market are saying, is that they don't want these big asks. The average gift, I actually think the average gift stayed the same, so it didn't lift anything. All right, next test. We also wanted to find a new premium to mitigate the risk of the tote fatigue. So the tote bag had been in the market for many years, and we're thinking, ugh, people have seen this a lot. We mail monthly. People are walking around with this tote bag. We need to find a new premium. So we swapped it for a keychain flashlight. So do we think this won or lost? Okay, all right, mixed bag. Megan? It worked. We tested this 3 times, and the key takeaway here is sometimes you need to accept success as much as you need to accept defeat. We could not believe that the flashlight, we loved this, we thought it was great, but we just thought this tote bag was such a strong performer and had been a strong performer so long, we could not believe that the flashlight had increased response significantly. I want to say the tote was 1% response rate. The flashlight, I think, was a 1.2 or 1.3, and it just was shocking to us. So again, you need to sometimes accept success because there was an opportunity cost here that we kept on retesting it, and the response was so high that we lost out on some potential new donors because we didn't roll out with this premium. No, the flashlight was actually cheaper than the tote bag. It wasn't significant, but it was a little bit cheaper. All right. The next thing we wanted to test, so we tested the tote bag. So after that test, the tote bag and the flashlight actually became dual controls because they both were still strong performers. Just because the flashlight beat it doesn't mean we wanted to totally roll out with it with the million quantity that we're doing. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so it became dual controls. So we wanted to build on kind of testing the tote bag after we saw the results of the flashlight premium. So we decided to test the design of the tote bag. So This here is actually two different designs. We have the one on the left, that's the Doctors Up Orders, just a, brand awareness kind of tote bag. And then we have the one on the right, which is more of a, kind of a statement piece that really, when the donor's carrying it, they're like, this is how I feel, right? So we tested these two different designs to see if it would improve response. So which one do we think won? Do we think the one on the left, Doctors Up Orders won, or do we think the statement piece won? All right, people like the statement. Maybe we should get these bags for you. All right, Megan? They both won, actually. So the one on the left had increased response more than the control, but so did the one on the right. So they both won, and we actually rolled out with the one on the left. So the good thing is you can have two winners. And the good thing about this is that while we rolled out with the one on the left, we are seeing a bit of fatigue with that one. So we know that the one on the right is also a winner. So we are retesting it this year to see if it still has the impact that that it had when it was originally tested. Another learning that a key takeaway that will help with resources, we know that the one on the left works, the image works. So what we've done is we've converted that image to be on stickers, on bookmarks, on coasters, all sorts of different creative. And it really helps since the artwork is already approved internally. We know it's a success in the market. We've been using this image throughout many of their kind of premium pieces. So that's another kind of key takeaway. All right, next test. All right, remember those face masks that we wore from 2020 to 2022, maybe? We actually tested this as a premium, as a swap out to the tote during the height of the pandemic. And so what do we think, how do we think this one did? All right, we think it lost. Interesting. Okay, well, this one, Megan, if you want to show the results, it was outstanding. Remember that 1% response rate that we said was really great? It was actually a 2.4 response rate with the face mask. And so the key takeaway here is that some tests are worth fighting for. Doctors Up Orders is a medical organization. To get this premium, this face mask approved, took a lot of resources and effort, but it was worth it because we got a 2.4 response rate. And the other key takeaway is that you want to strike while the iron is hot. Obviously, some of us, a lot of us are kind of over masks. So this is a premium that was only going to be hot and considered valuable for a certain time and hopefully our lifetimes.
There's a question, Michelle, what was the month and year?
So it was 2020. It was the fall of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then we had a couple years where we could use this mask. And, it's interesting because when the vaccine came out in June or July of 2021, we saw a fall off, but we had already committed to mailing this in the winter or in the fall of 2021. And then what happened? We had Omicron. So then we saw that the face mask response rate increased again. So there was a lot of kind of highs and lows with this one. This is now currently off the market. We know this isn't something that people want, but we think it was an interesting result. Was just the pandemic increase in donations overall, like Carrie was explaining?
When Carrie gave the state of the industry presentation this morning, she was talking about how human services, and I think international as well, saw a huge rise during the pandemic. Did Doctors Without Borders have the same?
Yes, they had a huge influx of new donors. And what's interestingly is we were like, okay, we're at the COVID bump, but then Ukraine happened and MSF was also on the ground in Ukraine. And I would say that the number of new donors for Ukraine was more than COVID, which was interesting. All right, next test. Okay. So we saw a little bit of a dip with the tote bag, and we wanted to see if just adding a pen that you see in the middle there would help increase response enough to offset the additional cost of the pen. So do we think this adding of the pen helped increase response, again, enough to offset the cost? Betsy's saying no difference. Anyone else? No. Okay. All right. Well, Megan? It actually did. Sometimes your control just needs what I like to call a little bit of a glow up. You don't need to revamp it. So just adding that pen helped increase response quite a bit. I think it got it to like a 1.2 or 1.3, which is more than enough to offset the cost. So now the control includes this pen. It's a really nice pen too. All right, the next test. All right, so as we know, inflation, costs, oh my gosh, all the things that we're all experiencing. Mail is experiencing this, like production costs, postage costs, everything's just so expensive. So we're trying to find ways to decrease the cost of this package because that tote bag is very expensive. So we need to do this while also protecting that strong response and average gift. So we wanted to test address labels. And I'm sure many of you may use address labels. I know I use them. But there's something that's very, very popular in fundraising. They're very successful. They work with a lot of different organizations. So we wanted to test address labels. So do we think including replacing the tote bag with address labels helped response, made no difference, lost? What do we all think? Okay. All right. Well, Megan? The response, it hurt. Ouch, that was a painful test, but sometimes that's okay. It's learning, right? So the response rate dropped quite a bit. I think it dropped to under 1%. And I think the main takeaway here is that a longstanding control is one for a reason. Even though we may be sick of the tote bag because we see it in and out every single day, prospective donors, they don't see it every day. And if results show that they like a tote bag, maybe keep the tote bag. All right. And we did a lot of premium testing for Doctors Up orders over the past 2 years. We did a pill box to the left, we did eyeglass places, you see at the top right. We did a multi-purpose pen, which is at the top right, which is a flashlight, screwdriver, kind of like a Swiss Army knife without the knife. We did a fanny pack, because those are all the rage right now. And then we did a cell phone, what do you call it? A cell phone sleeve. So this is a lot of testing, and it was very easy to do these tests because all we did was swap them for the tote bag. And with all this testing, and you don't have to guess on anything, we did a lot of testing, and Megan, if you want to show, there is actually only one winner, and that was the multi-purpose pen. So we were actually very surprised because of the pill box would do well because obviously it's a medical organization. It ties in nicely with the pill box. Ugh, donors did not like that one at all. So we tested into the multi-purpose pen. So you go to the next slide, we'll talk about kind of the key takeaways when it comes to test. Oh, actually, sorry. This is kind of the two controls. You know, we did all that testing that I showed you, and this is what the two controls look like today. And if you remember what the original control looked like, it's not that different from where we are today, but it took a lot of testing to get to where we are today. So on the left, you have the tote bag with the new design. We have the pen in there. And on the right, you see, and then we have that FedEx zip envelope. And on the right, you see that beautiful multi-purpose pen that has been extremely successful. I think we're at a 1.5 response rate for that one. And that's a really strong package that we rolled out with. So those are the two controls of where we ended up today. And then kind of the key takeaways, if you go to the next slide, you know, when testing, you want to win big and fail fast. Not all your tests are going to be winners, but at least you have these learnings that you can leverage for the future. So don't be too scared to test. If you can, try to test something that requires minimal resources. Our time is money at the end of the day, and you don't want to use a lot of time and effort for kind of testing that is not going to get you anywhere. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides. Remember, with anything, you might really love something, but that doesn't mean your donors will. So don't be so tied to a test idea, and don't be hurt if your donors don't respond to it. And just because a premium works with another organization, that doesn't mean it will work for yours, but it's worth trying. So think about kind of what works for other organizations, try it, and then move on if it doesn't win. And always keep on thinking of new ideas. It's always very, very hard to beat a longstanding control. I'm sure Jordana can attest to that with her clients. There is always one unicorn, like that face mask. You know, that did really, really well. The multi-purpose pen, that did well. But we had to test a lot, kind of like dating. You got to date a lot to figure out the right one. So that's kind of my key takeaway with testing. All right. Now we're going to talk about package testing. So how many, you can just shake your head or raise your hand or whatever. I think all of us can kind of feel like reinventing the wheel. You get kind of tired of something. So like, let's do something brand new and shiny, and that should work, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. So if we go to the next slide, Megan. We've done a lot of that. We've done a lot of reinventing the wheel. We did, a Stories of Hope package at the top left. We did a poster package at the top right. We did this doctor toolkit package, the bottom left, that had kind of all the things that doctors in the field, or samples of things that doctors in the field bring. We even did a puzzle package at the bottom right to kind of show where Doctors Without Borders is working. So what do all of these packages have in common? Well, dun, dun, dun. We loved every single one of them, loved them. Like, one of those packages is my idea. I was like, I loved that package. But none of them beat the control they were up against. And all of them took a lot of time and resources from the agency, from the people producing the packages, from the clients. It was just a lot of time and energy. So how do we kind of stray away from reinventing the wheel? If you go to the next slide, we can tune it up. We don't always have to create something brand new and fancy. And if you think about the world today, if you think about movies, television, books, etc., sometimes there are these great new stories. But a lot of the time, if you think about it, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Full House, I don't know, we're always rebooting shows, right? The same can be said for rebooting direct mail packages. And so you can just tune up the wheel. You don't really need to reinvent the wheel. I feel like I totally dated myself with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Full House. But anyway, if you go to the next slide, I want to talk to you a little bit about how we went from the package on the left to the package on the right. So the package on the left is a package that is mailed to current donors of Doctors Without Borders, so people who already give to the organization. It is one of their most successful packages of the year. It's called 10 Reasons, and it's 10 reasons why you should renew your support for Doctors Without Borders. Very simple package, as you can see. It's an envelope. There's a little sticker that says Proud Supporter, a letter, a reply form, and a return envelope, so you can put your gift in. So we knew that this is a really great package. So we wanted to see, could we turn this into an acquisition package? And we tried it. Instead of 10 reasons, we made it 5 reasons, because it's a little bit, you have a new donor, they don't have a lot of time, they're not so committed to you. So you just need to kind of focus on the 5 reasons why someone should join the organization. We included a letter that we knew from the acquisition control that worked, a lift note from a doctor that has been used. We had the same similar letter of 10 reasons, but we made it 5 reasons. And we just included components that we knew from acquisition worked and put it into this appeal package and made it into an acquisition. So this package, if you go to the next slide, what it took to do this, there was no new copy required. And I would say copy is kind of the biggest resource and effort a new copy is to getting a new package. We leveraged working components to create a new package, and this required very minimal time and resources. Those packages I showed before, that puzzle package, the Stories of Hope package, those took like months to create. This probably took 2 weeks to create, because we were leveraging resources and we were leveraging things that we knew worked. And so this is currently in the market. We see that it made no difference when compared to the control. And this is not compared to the tote package, it's compared to a different package, but there's no difference. So we're actually retesting it just to make sure seasonally if it's okay. But we're able to come out with a package that didn't require a lot of resources and didn't require kind of a lot of money either and time, and we're able to get results pretty quickly. So that's kind of one way that you can reimagine a package and create a new one. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, all right. So that was kind of it with in terms of the package testing. And then Megan, do you want me to talk to this?
Sure, I can. Doesn't matter.
Okay, all right.
So as we kind of wrap up today, we just kind of wanted to talk about our final kind of key takeaways about the fundamentals of testing that we have gone over today. And as we've talked about, the first one is really making sure you're identifying the problem and that you're all on the same page about what your goals are for your testing. And because that is really key to determining what your next steps will be and really formulating a plan of action that will allow you to implement tests in a strategic way and will allow you to build on those results for future campaigns. As we've talked about, we are never afraid to retest as things get stale or as times change. I know for digital, we are, frequently retesting things as technology changes, just to make sure that the techniques that we're using are still resonating with donors. And then finally, it's really easy as we do all these tests to think that we'll remember the results forever and that we won't forget what was the winner for these tests. But of course, life gets busy, we get busy, and it can be easy to forget those things. So we always try to make sure that we have a procedure in place for keeping track of our test results, and just also for us to go back to, and sometimes it's easy to lose track of how long it's been since we've really tested something. And that can be a good reminder that it's time to revisit that particular test. And of course, on the same note, making sure that we're always taking the time to implement our winning tests. After a campaign ends, sometimes it can be easy to move on just to the next thing, but we want to make sure that we are always keeping our winning results in mind as we implement new tests. So that is all for us today. As far as examples go, do you all have any other questions for us?
Yes, I have a question to Michelle. So when you are testing the gift like a totes, instead of the global testing, have you tried some sub-tests within certain segments? So comparing the female donor, male donor, comparing the people in the West or East. So it's just adding some complexity. So you just stay with the global testing, or? So.
No, that's a great question. So I'm trying to make this not too complicated. So within the fundraising market, there are some lists that you mail out to that are premium responsive lists. So we know that these lists, so I'm going to make this up, I'm not sure, but like say that we know that the Red Cross, UNICEF, and I don't know, ASPCA, we know that they are very responsive to upfront premiums. We would take those lists and we'd mail premiums to them. But if we know that there are other lists that don't really respond to premiums, we mail different packages that don't include premiums. So that's kind of how we do it. We don't segment for MSF specifically, and none of my other clients, we don't segment based on gender or where their location or anything like that. Jordana, do you have any?
Yeah, I was going to say, just to chime in on that, it can get a little tricky because sometimes if we over segment and we identify by gender or location, the cost to do different packages or different premiums or different approaches gets out of control. Mm-hmm. And especially in the mail, I know we've talked a lot about paper increases, postage increases. Sometimes it's more cost effective. We get better costs when we're mailing 100,000 of this type of package versus 50,000. And, I know across clients, we've kind of done some micro testing within, maybe not based on like male or female, but donors who have given in the past 12 months, in the past year, versus folks that haven't given, in the past 2 years. So looking at giving behaviors to help guide us in terms of the most strategic package. So sometimes we'll do that, but normally those changes are a bit more minimal and don't require as much package variation, just to keep costs more in line. And also it can get a little complicated on the actual production side of things. And, our test results sometimes show that it doesn't even make a difference.
It is easier, I think, to test in digital. In email, you can do a lot more segmentation, you can do a lot more targeting and advertising, that kind of thing. So, you could send a different package to people who give over a certain level or below a certain level, or, et cetera.
Yes, definitely. Doing that sort of segmentation is much easier in digital as long as you have the data resources to implement something like it. You can really do a lot of interesting segmentation for donors.
Any other questions? Michelle and Megan, I just want to thank you for an outstanding presentation. It was great. And Tatiana already asked at the beginning if she can use this in her classroom because she wants to use the examples. So the answer is yes.
Well, thank you for your time and letting us present.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. It was
Thank
great
you
to be here
both.
with you.
All right, bye.
Thank you.